Hi, this is Carlos Cousins, and the following SAT writing question is asking about the first sentence of a paragraph. This is our conclusion paragraph, but our first sentence here is supposed to introduce the author's discussion of the Patent Act. So it's got to be a good topic sentence for the discussion of the Patent Act throughout this paragraph. It has to be something that every sentence here sort of gives evidence for. So, okay, if we leave it as is, Samuel Hopkins received the first patent on July 31st, 1790 for the making of potash and pearl ash by a new apparatus and process. So this seems to be telling us about a new apparatus and process. And it would seem that this uh, story, specifically about Samuel Hopkins and the new apparatus and process, would be for the making of potash and pearl ash, would be what the whole paragraph will be about. But we actually want to be talking about the Patent Act as a whole, not just Samuel Hopkins' new apparatus about a ash. So that doesn't make sense. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson was the first patent examiner. This wouldn't be about the Patent Act again. This would be about Thomas Jefferson being the first patent examiner. We're not talking about Thomas Jefferson. The success of the Patent Act was so great that it took only 3 years for it to be repealed, even though hurdles such as cost were high. So this looks good. Let's go ahead and see if the rest of the passage backs this idea up, that it had a lot of success, but that for some reason that success led to its repeal. That's a little bit strange. When something is successful, you don't repeal it, you don't get rid of it. Even though cost is high. Actually, this doesn't make nearly as much sense. This is almost contradicting the fact that it was successful. I'm just going to go ahead and cross this one out right away. And this leaves us with answer choice D. So although 57 patents were granted in the first 3 years after Washington signed the Patent Act into law, the review and approval process was too cumbersome and intensive, which soon led to a backlog of applications. So this is the only one we're left. It says that Washington signed the Patent Act into law, but the review process was very cumbersome, which led to a backlog of applications. Let's see if there's evidence for that. So Samuel Hopkins was the first to receive a patent, and then they're telling us the unreasonable amount of time that it took to obtain a patent was criticized by members of the patent board itself. Okay, so unreasonable time. It seems like a backlog. That seems evidence, good evidence for that. Responding to this criticism, Congress repealed and replaced the original law with the Patent Act of 1793. Okay, so we had to repeal that patent, like this said, and then replace it with something else. So it looks like the original patent process was too cumbersome and intensive. Awesome. Eliminated the sufficiently useful requirement, etc., etc. This was a big deal. Nearly 10,000 patents were granted in a period of less than 40 years. Furthering its effort to address problems in the previous acts, Congress passed the Patent Act of 1836. So there was even more problems, and they had to pass a new one. It looks like there's more issues here. Too cumbersome and intensive, which established the patent office and allowed patentees to extend their protection for 7 additional years under certain circumstances. Now fixed, the process for obtaining patents was positioned to flourish. So this looks like a really good answer choice. The review and approval process has been too cumbersome and intensive, which soon led to a backlog of applications, and changes had to be made as a result. I hope that helped with this problem, and happy prepping.